Hello, my name is Michelle and I'm a life coach specializing in people that have complex PTSD or who are overcoming narcissistic abuse. Today I wanted to talk about the golden child and what happens to the golden child when they become an adult. First of all, the term golden child to me is both appropriate and misleading at the same time. It's appropriate in the sense that when they're children, nothing they do is ever wrong, right? They can get away with anything. They're complimented no matter what they do. They're praised. They're raised above their siblings and even the spouse of the narcissist. But it's misleading because that sounds like that would be nice. But in order to be that golden child, it comes at a great cost. The toxic narcissistic parent forms an unhealthy fusional bond with the golden child, with their thoughts, their ideas, their passions, their goals, becomes transplanted into that child. And when the golden child is young, when they dare show any glimpse of authenticity, it's often met with rejection. That love that they are the only ones that have seemed to learn how to get disappears. And the golden child quickly learns that in order to keep that love, they have to stamp out their authenticity. Any autonomy that's displayed by that child will be met with screaming, narcissistic rage, rejection, or withholding affection. When they're young, even getting spanked for their autonomy. So what happens is that the narcissistic parent virtually assassinates the character or the individuality of that golden child. So what happens to them when they grow up? In my life coaching practice, I've come across 3 different types of adult children of narcissists that were the golden child. There are actually four different things that happen to them, but I've only come across 3, and once you learn about the 4, you'll understand why. So with that in mind, what happens to this child that is erased so that they can please their parents, so that they can stay in that role of being the golden child? What happens to them? It's not difficult to understand that one of the things that happens is that they become a narcissist. I mean, they've basically been in narcissist training from the time they were born. They've seen their family members, their siblings, and their other parent always in that hamster wheel trying to gain the love and approval of the narcissist. The narcissist has portrayed himself or herself in a position of power and superiority and has trained the golden child to be the same way. So oftentimes they'll grow up, they'll be very successful because their narcissistic parents supported everything they did, paid for everything. So they have a successful career, they wind up getting married, and they wind up repeating the abuse. They are now the narcissist, the superior being in that family generation, and it just goes on, and it's generational abuse. Narcissistic behavior can be learned behavior. Now, obviously, I've never worked one-on-one with somebody in that category because somebody in that category has learned and been trained to believe that they are perfect. Number 2 is moochers. These are golden children that were spoiled, that never had to do a single thing to earn anything. So they grow up almost unable to care for themselves. They can never seem to keep a job because every time it gets difficult and they quit or they get fired, their narcissistic parent bails them out. So they never learn valuable life lessons in order to become independent and completely on their own. Now, this is okay with the narcissistic parent because now they have groomed and trained the perfect caretaker. This person, this golden child, won't be going anywhere. They won't be moving away. They probably won't get married. They probably won't have any children. Their whole life will be revolving around the narcissistic parent, and that's completely fine with the narcissistic parent. Number 3 is when the adult golden child of narcissistic parents is not a narcissist, is not even high on the scale, but they do have narcissistic fleas. That may not be an attractive term, but we use that term because it makes sense. If you have one dog sitting here and it has fleas and you put another dog by its side just sitting there spending time with that dog, it's inevitable that the other dog's going to get fleas as well. Well, it's the same thing with children that grow up with a narcissistic parent. Maybe they have too much empathy, which prevents them from climbing that scale on the narcissism scale. However, they have learned behaviors just by association with their narcissistic parent. And I've worked with a lot of individuals like this, where they realize that their upbringing was toxic. They realize that they have learned behaviors ingrained in them. It's part of their programming, but they don't want them. So they seek help trying to break free of their internal programming as well. And number 4 is the erased adult. And this is the golden child, or the adult golden child, of narcissistic parents that I've dealt with most often in my face-to-face coaching. This is the adult child that was so perfectly groomed as a child to erase their inner self, to not feel their authentic feelings, to shove their viewpoints inside, to please the narcissistic parent at the expense of their authenticity. When I talk with these individuals, their tone is like the pleasant tone. Look, everything I say, and no matter what I'm saying, is always going to be in a pleasant tone. There's no range in how they talk because they have mastered the perfect tone that their narcissistic parent wanted them to master. Their expression is not that it's blank, it's this, I'm here to please, and nothing I say, I will not do or say anything that will displease. And even if I'm talking about something horrible, no expression on my face will change, and I'm going to talk like this, and that's what it's like. It's like there's no range of emotion or expression ever shown on their face. When they look back at their childhood, they know that they should be angry and they should feel hurt, but they can't feel it. It's almost like they need an emotional defibrillator to jumpstart their emotions so that they can actually feel. This individual needs to work just as hard as the scapegoated child or the adult scapegoated child to love themselves, to allow themselves to feel authentic, to allow themselves to be assertive, to have an opinion, to live life authentically as opposed to in the unconscious programming of their narcissistic parent. So in essence, when we look at the 4 consequences of being an adult golden child of a narcissistic parent, their life was not golden. Life was not good. They also were abused. It was just done differently. And in a way, it's harder for them to move forward because the scapegoated child sees the abuse. They may not understand it, and they may blame themselves for it when they're children, but they see how horrible the treatment of the parent is. It's obvious, it's overt. Whereas the golden child doesn't see the overt abuse. Their abuse is more veiled, it's more hidden, and it's done almost as if it's out of love or kindness. And so the golden child, for that reason, has it harder because it's hard to see through or past that veil, which means they wind up staying home a lot longer than the scapegoat. Most scapegoats leave home between 16 and 18 because they just can't take the abuse anymore, whereas the golden child stays longer. So that gives the narcissistic parent more time to abuse, mold, condition. And then they've been fooled their whole life that to see reality is very difficult, and they suffer for a very long time. In the case with the scapegoat, when I worked with individuals that were the adult scapegoat of a narcissistic family, they have to learn to love themselves, right? They have to learn that their lack of love that they were inflicted with, was abusive and was wrong, and it wasn't deserved, and it had nothing to do with them. That's something they need to grasp. And guess what? That's easier to grasp than the fact that the golden child has to learn how to be human. The golden child has to learn how to feel connected to their feelings, how to know who they are. The golden child has no sense of self. The scapegoated child's self was rejected and abandoned and unloved. And that leads to self-love deficit, which is something they have to overcome. But in the case of the golden child, they never developed a self. So they're adults and they're like an empty tomb. So my purpose for making this video is to clear up any misconceptions with the fact that the golden child's life is better. It's not. It's just different. They were still abused. They were just abused in a different way. And I know it's hard sometimes to have some compassion for the adult golden child of narcissistic parents because oftentimes they become narcissists. So I understand that it's a little bit difficult to have that empathy or compassion for them, but they don't all become narcissists. And there are many that wind up in the other three categories. And these individuals suffer just as much as the scapegoated child, just in different ways. The good news is that for those that really want to change, want to break out of that unconscious programming, they can, just like the scapegoated child can as well.